Good morning, everyone. Students, parents, family, friends, who's ever watching today, welcome to Lee Day Live, our coffee Q&A session with President Conn. We're glad you're here. Dr. Conn, good morning. Welcome. It's a beautiful morning on our campus.
It's a gorgeous morning. It's great to be with you. And I got to say, I don't know, can the camera shot show your burgundy socks?
I don't know if I'd be happy to show them. Look at that,
yeah,
right?
Look there. I mean, that is so trendy.
I'm trying.
I've never seen Phil Cook look that kind of trendy and useful. And me, I got navy blue socks. Why? That's the way you're supposed to dress.
That's right.
And I tried to get me a pair of red socks, and they just flew out of my hand.
It did, and it matches your blue shirt too, so it's a little trendy.
Okay.
It's coordinated.
Right.
It's good. And so we're in our burgundy socks and our blue socks, and we're glad to be here. Usually, Dr. Conn, on Lee Day, there are hundreds, thousands of people on campus. This is different. We have a different dynamic today.
Yeah, this whole time is different, and of course that's why we're doing this virtually instead of in person. We're in a tough time in American life, and everybody's feeling it. But one of the things about it we really hate is that what a great weekend Lee Day weekend always is. And I love seeing all these high school kids and prospective students and parents coming to this campus. It's a wonderful time. So we don't have them here, but boy, do we ever have the weather for it.
Yeah, it's a perfect day. And this particular session, one of the most popular sessions over the years at Lee Day has been this coffee, this information session with you. And so we wanted to bring it to our guest at Lee Day Live. And in that, you talk about balancing acts, that while things are different, what's not different at Lee is that we're looking forward and we're ready to go and continue to do what we're doing. But that does bring some balancing acts. So, for example, with our students have choices they have to make, but they want to balance that with the commitments that we have, how we want to limits and control that we have. Yeah. How do we approach our students, Dr. Conn, as they come to Lee, finding that balancing act?
Well, you know, a college life is very different from a life back home for kids who are in high school. Big shift occurs. It occurs mostly for those students. Yeah. You've been a high school senior, you've been in your home, now you're off on a college campus. But a shift occurs for the parents too. And, you know, there's this phrase, in loco parentis, which is a Latin phrase that means in the place of the parent. And it describes the fact that in a certain way, a college, a university, a place like Lee, operates in the place of the parents. Mm. So, you know, I like talking with parents about that whole idea because parents know exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about balancing freedom versus commitment, freedom versus responsibility. And that's happening in the home when you've got a child in high school. But then when they come to college, wherever they go to college, then it shifts. You know, the burden shifts, the responsibility shifts. And at Lee, we handle that a little differently from most places. And I'd have to say, most places just don't worry about it too much anymore. They say, hey, they're grown-ups, they're 18. We'll teach them. We'll deliver educational content, but we're not going to try to be like parents. So, you know, at Lee, we try not to be like the smothering mother, you know, the over-parenting, the helicopter parents, that sort of thing that we hear so much about. But in a certain sense, we feel like parents. Yeah. You know, I honestly feel like daddy to these kids. I feel like granddaddy.
You know? I'm the dad age now.
Yeah, you're the daddy, and I'm old enough to be your daddy. But
that's true.
They call me Papa Conn around here. And I think they call me that for a reason, because I think there is a kind of sense of responsibility and that's rather parental. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, right now, my wife and I have 5 grandchildren, sorry. 5 grandchildren in the Lee student body right now. And so it comes really naturally to me to kind of feel the need to balance these things. Freedom on the one hand. I want to give these kids some freedom. They need to grow up. They want to grow up. It's time to grow up. Nobody's going to come pull them out of bed in the morning and, you know, dust them off and send them off to class. Nobody's going to make them eat a well-balanced meal.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to make them go to church on Sunday morning. All those things that parents have done for them aren't going to get done unless the students themselves take the responsibility. So we want them to experience that freedom. We think it's a necessary part of growing up. On the other hand,
Yeah.
we believe there need to be some limits.
Yes.
So here at Lee, we do have some limits. And we try to balance this out. We have a reasonable set of rules. We don't micromanage the lives of our students, but we do set some boundaries for our students that are very different from what they'll get at a state university or a secular school. And we're not a Bible college, we're not a boot camp for young Christians, but we are a place that tries to balance all this new freedom they're going to have with some boundaries and a sense of personal responsibility.
Yeah. Well, by the way, we actually do. I always wonder when we do these shows. We have drinks in here, right? You have coffee.
That's actual coffee, yeah. It's Lee coffee.
Yeah, and I love, of course, the Lee mugs. We got it. That's product placement right there, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a coffee drinker, so I would be a little wine. This is water. It's quite good, even on a morning like this, on a Saturday morning.
I would say this, Phil. Anybody who drinks water out of a coffee mug has some serious problems.
It's a long list. That's just the beginning of the list, so no problem. Dr. Conn, that talks about the behavior, but we also have beliefs that we're trying to balance. We have beliefs and values that we want to impart, or one might even say indoctrinate to our students. But we also want students to explore and discover these things for themselves. So that's another balancing act that's very important. Apart from behavior, is the belief as well, and their beliefs.
Absolutely. You know, young people grow up more or less attached to the value system, the religious beliefs of their parents. As they get older and they get up into middle school and into high school, then they start to encounter other influences and they start to push back sometimes or explore those beliefs. It can go a lot of different directions. Well, college years are the years when that really, really takes hold in a person's life. And when students begin to really explore intellectually and they get exposed to all kinds of new ideas, challenging ideas, and new people and influences. And once again, you know, this won't be a surprise to any of these parents.
Yeah.
They've been experiencing this for the last few years, but it reaches a new level when these kids go off to college, wherever they go off to college.
Yeah.
Even if they stay home and live at home and commute to the local community college, don't think that's going to keep them from being exposed to these new belief systems and so on. Not at all. So how do we feel about that at Lee? Well, at Lee, we try to balance it. We want these kids to think for themselves. One famous philosopher once said, the first responsibility of every generation is to think for itself.
Yeah.
And it scares me a little to think of my grandchildren thinking for themselves, because I'm thinking, really? Yeah. But I remember when I was 18, and I was beginning to think for myself. And I grew up in a wonderful Christian home, and I pretty much understood what the belief systems were there, but I began to explore, and I did it right here at Lee.
Yeah.
And it changed my life. And I would like to think that all these many years later, we're still trying to do that same thing. Encourage students to think for themselves, but be there with them and coach them and explore these ideas with them in a context of things we really truly believe to be true. So we don't think everything's true at Lee. You know, people use the word dogmatic sometimes to describe people that are a little, they think, narrow-minded or something, but you know, dogma, it just means believing something to be true.
Yes.
Everything's not true. Some things are true. So what we say to our students at Lee, not just preaching at them from the pulpit or yelling at them like I like to do, what we say to them is, okay, think for yourself. Okay, let's explore those ideas. Let's talk about what other people think who disagree with us. But let's be clear about this. From my perspective, I say to our students over and over, I've lived a long time and seen a lot of things and heard a lot of things and explored a lot of ideas. And here, what I've come back to is this, that God is real, that Jesus Christ is his son, that the best life is the life that's committed to Jesus Christ, that faith matters. And so we're very upfront with our students. I had a friend come to campus one time, visit me, and this was a friend who works in an elite secular liberal university. And we had a billboard out on the highway at that time that said, Lee University, a Christ-centered institution. And this friend, in talking with me, said, I saw that billboard on the sign and said, that's kind of in your face, isn't it? You know, a Christ-centered institution. And I said, no, not at all. I mean, it's truth in advertising. Yes. It's labeling. We believe there's plenty of room to grow, explore intellectually, but we think we need to say to students, while you're here, we want to make the case for Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it, we'll explore it, we'll do it openly, but there's a balance between intellectual exploration and being committed to a certain set of ideas. We do both here at Lee.
Yeah, and that's who we are. So many things have changed over the years at Lee, but that core tenet, of course, has remained. We have behavior, we have belief, and we see this in chapel, we see it in the classroom. Those are the two places. So in chapel, we're trying to provide an experience that is affirming, familiar for students. So there's families at home, they're watching, they're sitting like this, watching church now. They're experiencing church like this in a lot of ways. Some are doing drive-ins, I think, go drive in your church, but they're sitting at church looking at their screen and worshiping. Well, at Lee, we have worship. So we're trying to affirm the familiar, but also give students an experience in chapel, particularly that broadens and expands. So this idea continues, and it continues in chapel as well.
Sure. Another part of the balance. We're not sure we always get it right, but we're always working at it.
That's right.
And here's the balance when it comes to worship. We want students to find new ways of worshiping because we want them to find their own personal, authentic way of worshiping best.
Yes.
But at the same time, we want to provide them some familiar voices of worship and patterns of worship. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. I'm not like my parents, and my children are not like me. So my parents took me to a certain kind of church where they had a certain kind of music and heard a certain kind of preaching, and where we had the rituals of, in my case, it was a Pentecostal church of a rather traditional nature. That was the worship experience that was familiar to me. All right. As I grew up and went off to college and got older, I had to find the way I can reach God. How can I worship? And then when I found that, my own voice in worship, my own way to experience intimacy with God, the kind of preacher who speaks into my life, not just the kind of preacher who speaks into somebody else's life. And fortunately, I met my wife here at Lee. She had come, in fact, from a very different worship experience. My wife came from South Africa, and they had worshiped much more sedately, I grew up in a kind of a rambunctious, loud, energetic kind of Southern Pentecostal worship. She grew up in the South African church, in which it was much more, it was quieter, and it was somewhat more kind of thoughtful in certain ways. What we did as we came to Lee is we had to find an authentic way that we could, on a regular basis, worship God. Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily the pattern that either of our parents had brought to us. It became our pattern. And then we tried to use that pattern with our family. Now our kids grow up and they've got to find their own pattern. And we understand that college days are a time to do that. So what we want to do is we want to let students see and hear different kinds of preachers, not a different kind of gospel, there's just one truth. Yes. But different perspectives and preachers that come from different places and speak in different styles. And we want them to experience many different kinds of music because we know that all kinds of music can glorify God. So we want them to have those experiences so that they can find their own way to worship. But at the same time, hey, there's nothing like the songs, the hymns, the music that you grew up on. Yeah. And we want students to have that familiar voice. There's nothing like the voice of God from the pulpit that reminds you of the home church. Yes. And and we want them to have that. Man, I miss worship here at Lee.
Yeah.
And one of the tough things about this spring semester that's been interrupted is I feed off of the worship. And I look out at those students, and we might have in Conn Center any given Tuesday or Thursday morning, 1,500 students worshiping, and at the same time we'll have a smaller worship service going on, which is a very different style in our chapel, and then what we call alternative chapel in Dixon Center. So we've got there. I like to remind our students, there's a lot of different steps in the dance with God, and the idea that we can come together and we can all experience that. We're not putting people under pressure to worship a certain way, but we want people to feel free to worship a certain way. That's part of the balancing act at Lee.
And we have done that so well for many years. These virtual chapels that we've been watching, so many alums are coming on and commenting, talking about how they miss chapel and if they could just go back. So I think we've struck that balance really well.
Interesting thing that lots of students don't like the idea of quote unquote required chapel. I mean, let's face it, most teenagers do not like anything that starts with the word required.
Yeah, we're going to make you do it.
Okay,
That's right.
We'll make you eat a steak.
That's
I'll
right.
never eat a steak.
No way,
again.
never.
Okay, so required chapel, I hate that phrase because it doesn't really describe what happens here. But here's the interesting thing. Lots of high school students coming to Lee say, what? They're going to make me go to church?
Right.
Here's what I hear from those same students.
Yes.
After they graduate, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years later, they think back to Lee and say, man, I miss that.
Yep.
I wish I could give me some more of that.
Yep.
Yeah, so we do require chapel because we think we ought to all be a part of a conversation about God.
Yeah.
And students feel that way too as they experience it.
So of course, chapel and the spiritual life experience is foundational to what we do, but so is the classroom. Yeah. So at Lee, we have a particular approach that we are allowing for students to keep academic rigor within reach. The students can aspire to do this. We also want to maintain certain standards in the classroom. We've got to produce excellence. It's one of the things we talk about all the time. So how do we balance making academic rigor possible, but at the same time getting students prepared to be excellent in their field, in their careers? We do it. And how do we balance that at Lee?
Well, that's one thing that I can talk about from personal experience because I still teach a class.
Yeah.
And just because I'm president doesn't mean I don't want to go in the classroom. So I go in the classroom and teach a psychology class. That's what I came to Lee to teach psychology. And I love teaching it. I love teaching Lee students. So I teach psychology every fall semester. All right, here's the balancing act I, as one Lee faculty member, am trying to engage in. And I believe faculty members all across campus are doing exactly the same thing. I'm looking out there at students, some of whom knocked the top out in high school. Yep. They scored in the 99th percentile in the ACT or the SAT. They got good study habits. They've got good time management skills. Mm-hmm. They're highly motivated. They're easy to teach. That's part of our students. I look across that same class and I will see other students who didn't really work hard in high school and they don't really have all those great study skills. They got the smarts. I've seen very, very few dumb Lee students in 34 years. Yeah. They got the smarts, but the question is, can I teach in such a way that will challenge that good student, that top superior elite student, and still provide a successful experience for the student that hasn't really worked hard in the classroom? Yeah. That's a balancing act. So, some students need different things. Some of them need to be encouraged and given a pat on the back and sort of boosted along. Yeah. And I see that happen so often with students, and they kind of relax as the class goes along and flower and start to realize, this is not drudgery. This is really good stuff, this classroom stuff. Some of them need that encouragement. Some of them need something very different. They need somebody to get up in their face and say, hey, look, Jack, you haven't worked hard in a classroom your whole lifetime. Yeah. So quit coasting on your talent. God wants to do something with you.
Are you talking to me right now personally, sir?
No,
okay.
No, and I know it's a lovely spring morning and I got a cup of coffee and I'm trying to be relaxed, but when I get to thinking about this, you know.
The point is there are students just like me who that's the Lee story, and you're right. They need to be pushed, and we do that.
Yeah, hey, we see a lot of smart kids around here that can make B's without breaking a sweat.
Yes.
And you know what I want them to do? Break a sweat.
Come on. Yes, sir.
It's not about the A, it's about getting inside that life that God gave you and making the most out of it.
Well, that's what I say all the time in the enrollment world, that these two things are not mutually exclusive, that you can work hard and pursue God's plan for your life. And so, Dr. Conn, a lot of families that I talk to in the enrollment process talk about our behavior and our beliefs in chapel and how we approach academics, but they want to know, can you get me to the next step? Can Lee get me to med school? When I get there, will I be competitive? Can I get to law school? Can I be a nurse? Can I prepare for ministry? The fact is, Lee does and is preparing students for the next step of careers, and we're doing it in hundreds and hundreds and thousands over the years. Can Lee get students ready for the next step for their career or their vocations that they're pursuing?
And that's the right question. If you're asking that question about the college you're choosing,
yes,
that's exactly the right question. Parents are asking that, but mostly students ask that. That's exactly the right question. I'll tell you this, if what you want to do is be an architect, we don't have architecture, we can't get you there.
Can't help you.
Go to a good architecture school, serve God, work hard.
That's right.
You know, what we've tried to do over the years is not put in majors, not put in programs unless we feel confident that they can be first rate and excellent, because we want to get them there.
Yeah.
You know, one of the newest programs we put in is nursing. We put it in about 6 years ago. And we waited for years and years. You know how many times we got asked by these young people who wanted to go into nursing, we've got nursing? No, we don't have nursing. And I kept saying, we're not going to do nursing until we can, go big or go home.
Yes.
Not big in size, but we want from the very first our nursing graduates to get great jobs and do great jobs when they get there. And my goodness, have we done that. To the point that 2 years after we graduated our first class, we were ranked the #1 nursing program in the state of Tennessee based on the scores of our graduates within the national nursing exam. We've never graduated a nursing major who hasn't passed the NCLEX and is out there. And right now, at a time like this, when there's so much focus on healthcare workers, I'm hearing so much about our nurses and our physicians and med techs and people that are out there doing such a great job. So, that's the right question. Can you get me there? And we can get you there. I'll say this. If we have a program, it's a good one.
Yes.
And we can get you to that next step. That next step may be grad school, as you say. It may be professional school, law, medicine, business. It may be the workforce.
Yes.
It may be field of ministry. It may be the home.
Yeah.
But I can say with great confidence to people who are considering Lee, ask yourself the question, not just, can I have fun? You know you're going to have fun around here. Not just, will it be a real legitimate wall-to-wall college experience? You know it's going to be that. The better question is, will it get me to the next step? And our answer is, you bet it will.
Excellent, great. And I've heard, we've worked together a few years on this, and I've heard you talk so many times, Dr. Conn, about making the decision, how students make the decision. There are some things we encourage students that are the wrong way to make these decisions. So what advice would you have for students who are listening and families that are listening, maybe reminding them of something that you said like this before? Maybe there are new families out there listening to say, look, here are things to think about. Don't make this college choice based on these things. Make the choice based on this.
Yeah, people make the decisions based on what their friends are doing.
Yeah.
So, if I had that high school senior in my zone right now, I'd say, don't you dare.
Yes.
Don't you dare let somebody else make this choice for you. High school's great, but when it's over, it's so over. You've got to go to the place that's right for you, not the place that your buddies are going to, not the place that your high school English teacher liked, So don't make the decision based on what other people think. A lot of people worry about distance. My goodness, we have so many students who come from hundreds and even thousands of miles who have wonderful experiences here at Lee. And what we've found is, you know, don't hang around close to home because you're afraid to kind of step out. I got an email from a student just in the last month from a senior who said, I remember when I heard you make a speech and you said, don't settle for hanging around home and keeping your life small. And this girl said, you know, and then I came and it was such a great decision. Hear it over and over. So, hey, if you're out there and you're a few hundred miles, several hours away from Cleveland, Tennessee, or if you're in California or New England or somewhere else in the world, don't let distance stop you from going to the right place. On the other hand, you know, a lot of people right here in Lower East Tennessee, Chattanooga, Hamilton County, Bradley County, all these surrounding counties, sometimes they worry about, I want to go off, meaning way off the school.
Go away.
Yeah. Hey, don't do that either. You can be so far away from home, 30 miles up the road. So don't make the decision based on what your friends think. Don't make the decision based on distance. And even this sounds a little crazy, but don't make the decision based on price.
Yeah.
And the reason is that, you know, that price tag can give you a little sticker shock when you look at it. You say, how in the world am I going to come up with this much money? And you would be surprised how many different ways people, once they've made the commitment, learn they can pay for a Lee University education. So, you know, I hope they will give us a chance. You know, first, you know, go with your heart.
Yes.
Then sharpen your pencil. And I believe we can show most people a way to afford a Lee education.
Those are all true, and even thinking about how we're making this decision, and students and families that are listening today, you know, like we said, we're on the porch here. We've got all the natural sounds going on. We got the birds chirping behind us. We got all sorts of natural, but it's a beautiful morning, and we've delivered this Lee Day Live Parents Coffee a little differently. At the end of this session on campus with this coffee that you have, parents ask questions. We don't have the opportunity to do this today in this regard, but we do have a saying at Lee that's become one of our mantras. And that is to expect something great. And that means a lot of things to us. And that's obviously means something very important to you. So as we wrap up our time together, Dr. Conn, when you say expect something great, what does that mean to students, parents, families, our external constituency? What would you say that expect something great means to you and to Lee?
You know, I love that slogan because it operates at two levels. Yeah. One, I want students to expect something great from themselves. Two, I want students and their families to expect something great from us. Yeah. We'll take that pressure. So first, you know, expect your life to be a great life. God has promised you a life of fullness and joy and purpose. And God will bring that into your life if you follow Him. So don't just expect to survive college, you know, expect to do something great in college and past college. Expect something great in your life. And that's one of the reasons that I stay so revved up about my job here at Lee is because I am able to go out there and meet so many of these young people who are now have been out 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you know, and I see what great things God has done in their lives. God does great things in their lives way beyond what they expect so often. He gives us exceedingly abundantly beyond what we would ever think or imagine. Yes. He gives us something great, so expect something great. And then the second part of that is, you know, expect something great from Lee. Yeah. So hold us accountable. We're making a lot of promises. We're describing a pretty special place. Yes. But I'll tell you this, we got 600 employees, faculty and staff that are busting our chops every day to give students something great. So yeah, there's a little bit of the pressure of expectations, but I think students and their families can expect something great from Lee and expect something great from themselves. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Conn, and thank you all for joining us today and being a part of this. We expect something great at Lee. We expect something great for this new Lee Day Live virtual campus experience. So we're glad that you're here, and we hope you enjoy the rest of this interactive, engaging process. Thank you for being here. We'll see you tonight throughout the day, but we're giving away scholarships tonight. Don't forget about that. Have a wonderful Saturday.